Hey, I hope it's working. Whenever I pick up one of these things, it never works. Can everybody hear me? Now? Yeah. Okay, I'm going to start. So welcome, everybody, to this EPC policy briefing. I'm very delighted to have with us today Ihor Zhovkva, who's Deputy Head of the Office of the President of Ukraine. Welcome to you. He has come here direct, hot-footed, from the Munich Security Conference, where Ukraine was pretty much the main topic of conversation and where US officials signaled their plans, frequently contradicting each other and sometimes even themselves, related to Russia's war in Ukraine and how it should end, as well as European security. Something the US no longer wants to take care of. Washington expects that Europe leads on a future deterrence mission in Ukraine, as well as take care of its own security after many years of us relying on the US as the security umbrella for Europe. Of course, the conference also took place a few days after President Trump spoke to Putin on the phone, and according to Trump, agreed to immediately start negotiations to end Russia's war in Ukraine, without mentioning Ukraine or Europe in the sentence. Since then, while the US has signaled that Ukraine would be part of the talks, Europeans remain excluded so far. All of this has come, obviously, for Ukraine. It's an extremely worrying situation, to put it mildly. But for Europeans, it's come as a very, very cold shower, or as the former Foreign Minister of Lithuania, Mr. Landsbergis, stated, if Europe doesn't wake up during all of this time, somebody might declare that it's actually dead. I think this is quite a good slogan. As we know, President Macron is holding today a summit aimed at Europeans actually stepping up first and foremost for Ukraine, but also for themselves. Indeed, we need to see a lot less talking and much more action. In parallel, we will be seeing a US delegation traveling to Saudi Arabia. I think they're due to be there tomorrow. President Zelensky, as far as I know, has already been to Saudi Arabia, or is just about to be there, and to the Emirates, where he signed a comprehensive agreement with the Emirates, and then he is going off to Ankara. So there's a lot of, things happening, a lot of movement, but where it's all going to, we don't actually know. Meanwhile, back in Ukraine, the country continues to fight for its survival as an independent sovereign state. So I would like to give you the floor first, Mr. Zhovkva, for maybe a few opening remarks, and then I will ask you some questions, and then we will go to the audience in the room and the online audience. I hope that one works better than this one.
Thank you. Well, first of all, thank you for having me here. Really a timely event. Thank you that it is really right. You said immediately after Munich. Munich was refreshing for everyone. And I'm picking up this quotation from former Minister Landsbergis. Yes, Europe should awaken. Otherwise, it will be too late. I'm not speaking about dead or alive, but I'm speaking about the things, the development of events is moving much far more quicker than the average Europe can stand. The high tempo is something common for Ukraine because we are living with high speed throughout the last 3 years, almost 3 years of open aggression of Russia against Ukraine. We're living at the ultimately high speed. Now we see the high speed is being demonstrated by the new US administration. I hope nothing new for everyone. But Europe is still lagging behind. 2 months ago, my president suggested to have a meeting of the key European leaders and the leadership of the institutions here in Brussels on the 18th of December on one topic. It was before inauguration still. What to do, what Europe should do as far as European security is concerned. Pay attention, not only the Ukrainian security, which is a cornerstone of European security, but the general approach to European security. And I, President, suggested that number of leaders meet. They met, a very productive meeting. But what was the follow-up? 2 months later, President Macron rightfully said, convening yet another meeting now, this time in Paris, with practically the same company, the same squad of leaders, I think exactly the same. And hopefully this time it will be resultful. Because if after this meeting we will be having nothing, or just political talks, or just reflection period, or just another white papers. In Brussels, there is, you're skillful in writing the white papers. There's no time for white papers. Sorry for this. I mean, let's write them later, memoirs, white papers, or whatever. But now it's time to act, not to reflect. And that's what my president was telling to the leaders in Munich. And that's what my president was telling to the leaders in Davos. 2 speeches, one after another, to the same topic. Please, let's act. Let's act together. We want peace. We in Ukraine want peace. We're the first country, first nation to want peace because our people are dying. But we don't want peace at any conditions or at any circumstances. We want just and lasting peace. Or just some US American leaders tell us just an honorable peace. Okay, the terminology doesn't matter. What matters is we need to have this peace. What are the conditions for having this peace? My president is very vocal on this. We need to have security guarantees, solid security guarantees for Ukraine, but again, not only for Ukraine, for European security. And we all know the components of these guarantees. So I hope today in Paris meeting, during this Paris meeting, this will be a significant talk, but not only talk, but work as far as these security guarantees are concerned. Certainly, the security guarantees cannot be sustainable without the US backup, without the US security guarantees. And my president is very vocal when talking to the US side on this, when talking to President Trump, talking to Vice President J.D. Vance, to their respective teams. We need to have it both. But when we're talking about European security guarantees, do we have a common understanding among the leaders and the institutions what kind of guarantees Europe is ready to give to us? Pay attention, Europe, not only the European Union, because we should not rule out the UK. Wonderful statement of Prime Minister Starmer today ahead of Paris meeting. That's the decisiveness, what we need, what we all need, not only Ukraine, but Ukraine first and foremost. Ukraine is now fighting for the support coming from the European states, coming from the US. But if we want the just and sustainable peace, not just a ceasefire that will be broken, in 2 months, 20 ceasefires we had under Minsk and normative formats. The biggest, the longest one was like no more than 2 weeks. And then it was broken by Russia. So 2 months this time, or even 2 years. But it will be mere ceasefire. It will be definitely broken. And this time, it may not only be against only Ukraine. You heard my president in Munich. Pay attention to what is happening or will be happening in Belarus this summer. It is the same scenario which we were having in 2021. So-called trainings, exercises. 3 NATO countries bordering Belarus. If we are still falling asleep, it's up to you. We will fight. We need to fight. If we will be left alone, we will fight. It's the only thing left to do. But when Ukraine suggests opportunities also, not only asking you to deliver, but when Ukraine suggests opportunities, let's invest to the military production of Ukraine, long-range drones and missiles, the unique technologies being built from scratch in Ukraine. So invest now, because now, yes, we need it more. We need these long-range missiles and drones to destroy the legitimate targets on the territory of Russia. Legitimate targets being military production sites, airfields, etc. We can do this, we are doing this, but in order to do it in more quantity and capacity, we need investment. And those who invest now will be first, after the victory, to get the export of this unique Ukrainian technology in future. So, I mean, how many more awakening calls do we need in Europe? I think this is the last one. If there is no reaction, or the reaction will be vague, Brussels style, you know, reflection period, food for thought, white papers, then we're in a very bad situation. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe just a follow-up question. I mean, it's clear up until now there has been a lack of political will to actually do anything because Europeans. I mean, the Europeans don't want to pay, or they haven't wanted to pay for their own security. But now the time for not paying is over. They need to start paying. Do you think we have reached this critical point? I mean, it's a gathering of, I think, six or seven countries in Paris.
Look, I mean, when we are said, again, by we I mean all Europe, that Europe should take more responsibility on its own security, where President Trump is wrong. When he is telling to European countries or to members of the alliance, you should pay up to, used to be 2%, now it's 5%, then probably let it be 5%. I mean, where is he wrong? Is anybody here in the room or on an online believing that Russia will not be aggressive after the possible settlement at this period of time? Anyone believes this? Or anyone believes that Russia will disappear or dismantle or whatever? Russia will be always aggressive. No business as usual at all. Russia will be on its geographical settlement where it is now. Ukraine will be on its geographical settlement on the eastern flank of Europe, of European continent. And we're ready to deliver our duty. But this is the European security, and everyone should pay its burden. In fact, it's much more cheaper for you now to invest into your own security and defense, because this Russian aggression is a wonderful, if this word is applicable, not wonderful, but a security test for each and every country on the European continent, for each and every, not only for our neighbors, our closest neighbors like Poland, like Romania, like other guys, but for all, for everyone in Europe. And we earned you time to make this analysis of the security check and to act. 3 years passed. Are all the European countries ready for a possible aggression? Are they ready to give many more support, weapons, ammunition now to Ukraine? Because again, Ukraine is in the forefront, and Ukraine will be destined to fight for its territory, for its people, for its state. But again, take it a longer perspective. So yes, I think it's high time to invest more. The choice is either yes or no. You can't have something in between. So here we invest, here we're thinking. You should all think, we should all think, what is the amount of armed forces, battle armed forces, those who are able to show themselves on the battlefield. And it's high time now to do it. It has to be done yesterday. But if we're not doing it now, tomorrow will be too late.
I mean, this necessitates Europeans scaling up very quickly, because, as you've said, for many years, there's been no sense of any security threat in Europe, and the military forces have been downgraded. So to have to scale them up very quickly is quite a tall order. But I agree, it's something that needs to be done. But maybe I can come back onto the issue of security guarantees for Ukraine. Because obviously a large-scale deterrence mission, I mean, I call it a deterrence mission because that's what we're talking about, is vital. But what other things do you consider to be vital as security guarantor? I mean, the Americans have more or less taken the NATO membership off the table for the time being, which was a mistake. I mean, you don't negotiate things away before you've even started. But what other security guarantees could Europeans offer Ukraine very quickly, not in like 6 months or a year, I mean, very quickly, immediately, now?
I mentioned some of them already. So weapon delivery and the ammunition delivery is one of the most important security guarantees, used to be and still even more important this year. I told you about investment into the Ukraine's own military production, a wonderful security guarantee. If Russia knows that we are having more and more of drones and missiles of the kind, long range, and they are seeing it every day and every night that we are using them, and we are destroying their legitimate targets. We are not destroying civil cities like they do. We are not, hitting the multi-story buildings or trading centers. What they do. But look, every hit is more and more precise, more target oriented, and we will be increasing it. This is one of the components of the security guarantees. And secondly, you can't but mention the idea, or already not the idea, which will be discussed today in Paris, hopefully, about the contingents and military presence. Again, if we are serious about European security, we need to have the presence of European armed forces on the territory of Ukraine. And this is where I cannot dwell on. Sorry for this. It is not for public discussions. But again, we see now that the countries are becoming more and more serious about this. Once again, to mention today's statement of Prime Minister Starmer. And we started this discussion with Prime Minister immediately as he became Prime Minister. See, some time has passed. We know the position of France. We want to know the clear position of other countries, of other European partners. And the quicker we have this position is one thing, but then you have to work on it. You have to work on the number of contingent. You have to work on the terms of engagement. You have to work on the necessary equipment, because, I mean, if it's land forces, they will need to be equipped. But by the way, it should not be only land forces. We see that Russia attacking constantly by drones and missiles, so air defense as a component of this, increasing the number of air defense systems. We still have not fulfilled the decision of NATO to provide 5 Patriot systems to my country. That was one of the huge results of DC summit, of Washington summit, NATO summit in DC. But still one system is lacking, and we all know the country. So like, this is the real security guarantee. This is the real deterrence package. Deterrence. So for Russia to understand, if they renew the aggression, if they dare to renew the aggression, let's speak in this case about Ukraine, against Ukraine, the result will be immediate, strong. We have this system of bilateral security guarantees, 28 agreements we signed throughout the last year. This is the baseline. Why the base? The fundamentals. Why? Because in most of these agreements, there is a concrete amount of money fixed for military of support to Ukraine year by year, within 10-year duration of these agreements. And most of the countries adhere to this. Like, again, sorry, but I mention this UK all the time. UK has in the agreement 2.5 billion pounds. When the new prime minister came, because the agreement was reached with the previous prime minister, with the previous government, with the previous party, but he told, I am sticking to this agreement. And I'm even increasing the amount of money. And in the new agreement, 100-year partnership agreement, we increase it up to 3 billion per year within the duration of the agreement. So this is what we have in the BSAs. We have, in most of the agreements, the line of weapons which is to be delivered to Ukraine throughout 10 years. And again, we need it even after the victory. We have the 24 hours consultative mechanism. That's what we were lacking in the infamous Budapest Memorandum, because, well, just mere consultations. But here we consult in order to increase the weapon production, the weapon delivery, the economic sanctions as a part of the security guarantees, by the way, etc. But this is only the fundamentals, and very good that we're having these agreements as of now. Had we had this line of this number of agreements, or at least half of them, in 2021 or 2020, Putin would have thought twice or 3 times in order to start the open aggression. Maybe he would still have started this, but the reaction would be much more quicker because, well, let's be honest, in the first days and months, we were alone without your weapon. Mainly, we had some deliveries before that, by the way, by Trump administration and by UK government, and that was it. And I remember the first phone calls my president was having with the European leaders were saying, no, but we cannot. Before that, in 2021, my president would demand sanctions, preemptive sanctions against Russia, and the answer was no, we can't. Let's tame the beast. Let's not provoke. We will introduce sanctions in case of. Okay, we are introducing now. Thank you for the 15 packages. 16 is about to be adopted, as I understand, should be ambitious, but far too late. The war is going on. We could have prevented it. We all together. But it has started. Now, for us, it's very important not to repeat this. So in case of any new aggression, which is highly possible, unfortunately, we should be much more prepared.
As a British national, please feel free to mention the UK as many times as you like. Maybe a final question related to their deployment into Ukraine, and then I'll move to a slightly different topic and then take some questions. Obviously, it would need a robust command structure. Do you think this is where the United States would need to play some sort of role, or Europeans can do that by themselves? Because this wouldn't, I mean, it's not easy to put that in place immediately.
I'm not that big military expert, probably the worst expert on command structure. But if you ask me about the instruments US can do, probably yes. I don't know how strong is EU military commandment, but we hear that the groups which were, or the structures which were initiated by the US, UDCG, SAGU, they are working effectively. And we are thankful to the new US administration that it saved this format. So the UDCG is working, and we had the meeting led by, again, I mentioned in UK defense minister, very smoothly, etc. Okay, the results this time a little bit different, but this format exists. This is very important because this is a unique format of delivering to us the weapon and announcing the new packages or whatever. I don't know. I don't have the answer about the formats of US engagement. I think even we're still not clear. Well, the US administration is still not clear, but we have to reiterate to them. We, again, I mean Europe, we will provide our European security guarantees, but they will be not enough, insufficient without the US, let's call it, backup. And the format will be discussed. I mean, it's probably not here in public to discuss the formats. It's up to military guys to discuss.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you now about the approach of the US, because there, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's been a lot of mixed messaging, including at Munich, different US officials saying different things at different times, not to mention President Trump's statements. I mean, how do you absorb this? I mean, what's your reading of where the US is at? And are you concerned about the upcoming meeting between the US and Russia in Saudi Arabia? I think it's tomorrow, Lavrov and Rubio. I mean, could the Russians, I mean, hoodwink the Americans? And how do you see this?
Well, we are working with the US administration on different levels. My president had both meetings before the inauguration, 2 meetings at least with candidate Trump and then President-elect Trump, I mean, Paris meeting. My president, after inauguration, had a phone call with President Trump. My president had a meeting with Vice President J.D. Vance in Munich and his team, and Secretary Rubio was there, and General Kellogg was there. So we are having official, and we are communicating with the team on the level of presidential team. Our chief of staff is communicating, myself is communicating. So, I mean, we are working. The commands in the press are the commands on the press. We are working with the official position of the United States, and I should tell you, and I will was present in all the phone calls and meetings. The phone call with Trump was absolutely constructive and down to the point. The meeting with J.D. was absolutely, down to the point and constructive. I cannot reveal you, obviously, all the details or whatever, but we in Ukraine have our own understanding of the next steps and our proposals to the plan. And it's public. I mean, you all know about peace formula, and it's not ruled out. You all know about victory plan, and some points are really liked by new US president. And I'm not only meaning the minerals, but I'm also meaning point 5, which is about Ukrainian brigades being placed in some countries of European continent, Ukrainian brigades serving in these countries, which, as I understand, the logic is to have more ability for the U.S. Troops to be used somewhere else. When we were presenting this victory plan to then candidate Trump in September, it was met with big interest. When my president and President Macron and President Trump were meeting in Paris on the 7th of December, there was also talk about security guarantees, including the components which we are talking about today. So we will be, and we are presenting our ideas and understanding to the president himself and to his team. My president clearly says to President Trump, I need to meet you bilaterally, in person, before your meeting with aggressor, and certainly before any possible negotiations on the level of leaders. That's the position of Ukraine, and we're clearly saying it. Then there is another clear position of my president, which is mentioning publicly. Europe has to be present at the negotiating table. And he's saying it to President Trump, he's saying it to Vice President Vance, and we are saying it to the team. We should hear the voice of Europe in this case. Are you ready to be present at the negotiating table? Very important question. Who will be representing Europe? Again, not only European Union, Europe at the negotiating table. Who is ready to present Europe at the negotiating table? Who is capable? Where there will be a unanimous decision. That's very important. And there's no time here to procrastinate and to have another white paper, sorry. We should appear with this answer to this question, let's say, no later than these days. And again, I'm hoping in Paris today it will be discussed. We should not lag behind. We are ready not to lag behind, I mean, Ukraine. So please stay in this tempo with us. It's nothing left than to sit and talk with the current US administration. You will not invent anything else. If you exchange the opinions in the press, well, it's good. It's one of the ways, good way, but not sufficient. We are ready to sit and talk together with you. That's it.
Europeans basically need to buy their place at the table. I mean, they need to prove it, if I can put it that way, for the first time that they're actually ready to do something. I mean,
let's prove it.
Commitments are stronger than words. And on the second point of who's going to be at the table, I read yesterday that the president of Finland, I mean, Alexander Stubb, he proposed the idea of a special envoy or an envoy for Ukraine, a bit like the previous, Mata Ahtisaari from CMI had been. I mean, what's your take on that? I mean, it sounds like a good idea to me.
Yeah, well,
that can represent all of the EU rather than, bickering between themselves.
If you call it envoy, let it be envoy. Yes, I mean this is I'm talking about. So someone representing Europe. President Stubb is very concrete and down to the point. I mean, he had a meeting with my president in Munich. Then, as I understand, later next day he was presenting his ideas on possible plan of peace settlement. Okay, the more ideas we have, the better. But again, in the end, we should speak one voice. I mean, we should have, sadly, we should have a coordination between ourselves. But in the end, whatever it is called, envoy or leader or president or prime minister, this would be only one person from Europe. You cannot have 4 or 5 people. Maybe you would like to have, but that will not be possible. We do understand. So again, but time is running.
Yeah, they need to break the habit of a lifetime, basically, and speak with one voice. I want to open the floor to questions now. So if you could tell us who you are and where you're from, I would be very grateful. So we can start over here. We also have questions online. So Romeo, I ask everybody to be quite short in their questions.
Thank you very much, Dmytro Shkurko, National News Agency of Ukraine. We have had already some kind of expectations from the Paris meeting, but what kind of expectation we can have from the tomorrow's meeting between the Russia and US representatives? Because obviously Putin recently sounded in his position that, okay, they are ready for negotiations immediately if Ukraine will give up the 4 oblasts, 4 regions which are occupied partially by Russia and refuse from the NATO membership. So that this is a very curious puzzle. What Ukraine is going to discuss with Russians at the table. And the second part of the question, would it be possible for Ukraine to create some kind of a common negotiable position together with EU? Is it real perspective? Thank you.
You're asking me what we are going to discuss tomorrow? Nothing, because we are not in this format. Again, if this tomorrow, I don't know. We haven't had anything official on that. No official information coming to us. U.S. delegation didn't tell us anything, etc. So I mean, it's speculation, or we may guess. I'm reading the news as well as you are that we'll be discussing bilateral relations, the possible meeting between the leaders, and situation as they call it in Ukraine or whatever. But, well, okay. So nothing to discuss for us tomorrow because we will not be there. Answering more deeply into your question, I mean, that is an idea. You're asking whether we're ready to will be discuss any Russian, conditions during the negotiations. Certainly not. And that's why we need the coordination. And answering your second part of the question, yes, it is possible and it should be coordinated. The position between Ukraine and Europe, yes, we need to sit and talk and to coordinate. Sure, absolutely. if you will, we should appear with our joint proposals. And certainly, we will be ready to coordinate it with the US as well before any possible talks or negotiations. That's our logics. You know, there were many conditions coming from Russia in the beginning of the war. You remember those denazification, demilitarization, D something or whatever. So if it is D, if there's a real negotiations, the negotiations when every side wants to achieve the result. Hopefully Russia really wants peace. Hopefully. We are proceeding from this. If you don't want peace, you probably don't start. Or if you start, hiding your real motives, you should also understand this. Oh yes, Ukraine is ready for coordination. Ukraine is suggesting coordination. In every meeting my president had during Munich Security Conference with European leaders, or with President von der Leyen and President Costa, or with the US delegations on numerous levels, because not only we had a meeting with the Vice President, but also with the delegation from Senate, from Congress. We are laying down our understanding and our proposals. We're discussing every question, including, by the way, not excluding, in NATO, if not membership, at least invitation, which could also be a part of security, could have been a very good part of security guarantees. Okay, we hear the position now, but it's, and you heard my president clearly stated it during the Munich speech, that it is not put off the table by Ukraine. We are ready to discuss it. We are not afraid to discuss it. We want to hear the position of other allies in NATO. Unfortunately, we don't hear it for now. Why? That's the question. To your leaders, why? So, yes, coordination should proceed. And we hope it will happen.
Thank you. Do we have other questions?
Yes, hello. We have a question from online audience from Rostislav Hotin. Mr. Zhovkva, could you please clearly explain the position of Ukrainian leadership on possibility of holding elections, presidential or parliamentary? Is Kyiv under pressure from the US to actually hold the elections later this year? Thank you.
No, we didn't have any official, again, I'm using this official, you remember we started from this, we're having the official conversation with the US administration, not in a single meeting or phone call. We did hear this, like you call it, condition or demand or whatever, this year. The position of Ukraine is very simple. The position of Ukraine is according to the law, ever martial law as of now. Martial law clearly doesn't allow to have any elections while martial law is operational. When the martial law is over, there has to be a certain period of time for preparations. Election process is a difficult process. We all know what was the process when in the peaceful time. Numerous elections. Ukraine is a democratic country. All our elections were in time and democratic, and no one will say that this president came to power in a non-democratic way. But we have the law. We have soldiers fighting in the front line. We have up to 7-8 million people living not in Ukraine. And I will not, we can have this list. But no one is saying, and you never heard it from president, that he's not ready for election, or he doesn't want an election or whatever. Sometimes this narrative we know where the narrative comes from. There's only one person who wants the election. And we all know his name, and will not mention it today. So, God forbid. But sometimes this narrative is also spread outside Ukraine. on a non-official level. Not you mean asking Rostislav asking me about US position? Why he's not asking about European position, European Union position? Not a single leader is telling it to president. So when there are all legislative conditions for this, certainly president is ready.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Elena Botita from the International Crisis Group. And I wanted to ask you, since you mentioned that you've been having bilateral talks with the US that have been constructive, how do you reconcile this positive trend, let's say, with information that is public, that is not forcibly constructive? In the sense that we saw, for example, contradictory stances from between Bentis and Exit, and positions on behalf of the US that are not really positive as for what concerns Ukraine's involvement in the negotiating tables. So how do you reconcile these two aspects? Let's say. Thank you.
Again, I'm following the official statement of the US side. And as far as the official statement of the US side, I don't find anything non-constructive, as you put it. We all have to act, and we all have to work with this current US administration. And that's the reality. I mean, we may, reflect or react, but this is, again, I repeat myself, the administration which acts with some high level of speed comparing to the speed which is more comfortable for Europe to live with. Let's be honest. Question is, are we capable to do this or not? For us, for Ukraine, it's necessary to win the war and to have just and sustainable peace. That's our ultimate goal. We hear from the current administration that they want to have just and honorable peace in Ukraine. Is it constructive? Yes, it is constructive. And we hear from the current administration the European countries or Europe should bear more responsibility for its own security. Is it constructive? Constructive. It's logical. It's fair enough. We hear from the US that Europe should pay more for its own security. Is it constructive? Yes, it's constructive and it's fair enough. Maybe there is something that we would not like to hear. I mean, it's not comfortable for us to bear our own responsibility. I mean, in the treaties, you have Article 42.7, much more ambitious than Article 5 of the Washington Treaty. But even the institutions tell us that's empty shelf. That's empty shelf for how many years? For how many decades? Why we are not doing anything on this? It's the war, it's Russian aggression in the middle of Europe in the 21st century. And it's going on. And the countries are still thinking, well, should we have the same amount of support, or maybe we should? What about European forces? I mean, my president clearly suggested an idea in Munich. You heard him. United Forces of Europe. That's the idea which was floating in the air since the, I don't know, Maastricht agreements or whatever. Why there is no United Forces of Europe? Why there is no European army still? Because everyone preferred to be friends with Russia, to have a constructive partnership with Russia. Okay, that time ended. So, I mean, that's my question. And no time to reflect, constructive, non-constructive, time to act. Otherwise, we will all lose.
As well, it's also to do with the fact that many Europeans, I mean, ordinary people, still don't feel the threat of the war because their leaderships have failed to communicate this, or, you know, flagged up the necessity that we need to spend more money because of the threat coming from Russia. And there's still, let's see if there's going to be a change of approach towards this, because they don't want to lose their seat in the prime minister's office or whatnot.
It's much
and
more,
this is a big problem.
much more cozy and comfortable to calm down. So it's somewhere far away. Well, in Poland or in Baltics, they do feel it's not far away, but somewhere, let's not name the countries, but it is no longer far away.
Yeah, for a start, in Brussels, in Belgium.
Yes, yes. And when my president says that we have all the intelligence information that Russia is planning something in Belarus, and it might, not necessarily will, but might be happening in the worst case scenario, you should be serious about this. If we have the information, then in 5 years, Russia will be more than ready to fight the broader sense on the European continent. You should be ready for this. You should take it into account. Simple as this.
I think we had one last question. Yeah. We just have a few minutes left.
Thank you very much. Nazar Bobitsky, CREAP. I know that Ambassador Zhovkva is a very great fan of EU and European Union and EU institutions. And I want to take this, perhaps the last occasion, to ask a little bit of a provocative question to Ambassador Zhovkva. Don't you think that if EU, Europe, European Union really wants to grasp a last chance to get a chair at the table where the European security and peace will be decided, maybe one of the few remaining options would be to really accelerate Ukraine's membership into the EU, meaning like really, really accelerate? Because at least Ambassador Zhovkva already mentioned that Article 42.7, mutual defense clause in the EU, at least from a lawyer perspective, has very unequivocal language that member states shall have an obligation of aid and assistance by all means in their power. And if we put aside, for instance, the security aspect, the rare earth potential deal, the EU has all the legislation and framework in place to safeguard member states' rights and obligations and to deal with investments in strategic security areas like rare earths. And there, both it can safeguard better Ukrainian interests and its own interests, because EU is now pursuing critical materials all over the world. So what's your take on that, Ambassador? Thank you.
Thank you, Nazar. I don't have anything against of speeding up or accelerating Ukraine's membership to the EU. More for this. I think you still will need some time to understand that that is mutually beneficial for the EU 27. Really beneficial. Thank you for bringing the security issue. Once again, Ukraine is ready to bear its responsibility for the security of the whole continent, even after the just and lasting peace is established. We will be here. We will not disappear. We will not be placed somewhere in the place of Switzerland. We will be here, and we're ready to protect all of us. That's the first benefit we are all having if Ukraine becomes a part of the EU. Ukraine is ready to bring really fresh air to the EU on many dimensions. Everyone is afraid of Ukraine's, and you know it better than me, Nazar, agrarian potential or whatever. But I think in the end, and we do understand that the most difficult part of our accession negotiations will be chapter about agriculture policy. But I think we will manage to find, we will certainly protect our national interests. Brussels will protect its agenda, but we will come to terms, definitely. I think this can be the most problematic issue. But then look, even now, even we have not yet opened any single cluster, our economy, Ukraine's economy, is already integrated partially into the EU single market. Gitanas Nausėda was very happy when he disconnected from the Russian energy system and joined And so, but Ukraine did it in the first days and months of the open aggression. And you remember, we're able to export our surplus and electric energy to the EU countries. Now, when we need, we're importing from you, but we are in the single electricity market already. Nazar knows it better than me, other sectors of the economy. And nothing dangerous is happening. Ukraine is practically here already. Ukrainians are working on your labor markets. They are highly educated. They master the languages. Sorry, we hope most of them will come back after the victory. But it's already integration on the level of peoples. After all, it's about peoples. It's not about institutions, presidents, and prime ministers, with all respect to all of them. This is about peoples. Do you feel Ukrainians as a hostile to you? No, probably, hopefully. What is left? People are there. Economy is there. What is left is just mere juridical things and some sectors, some complicated sectors of economy. In your narrative, even, you feel us, you take us as a part not only of the European family, but also, I mean, look, almost every European Council is with the participation of President Zelensky, which was not the case like 4 years ago, 5 years ago. Answering your question, I think the decision on Ukraine to be part of the EU will be a geopolitical one. A geopolitical one. Let's be honest. This will be not the only geopolitical decision. Some of our good partners and friends and neighbors were also entering the EU with a geopolitical decision. This will be a geopolitical decision after the peace is established, after the victory, on a different circumstances, not to compare with any other member state, the new member state. What we have to do in Ukraine, we have to be ready, technically, fulfilling our home task, making all this necessary procedure. We do understand they are boring. We already know now that they are boring, but we are doing them, we are fulfilling them. But when someone speculates now, take 10 years, 15 years, because it with previous member states was 10 years. Irrelevant discussion, just irrelevant discussion. First of all, because we are demonstrating record high speeds in all the components, we go by book. We follow every stage, European perspective, candidate status, pre-negotiations, starting negotiations, etc. But every stage we are doing it rapidly. The record high speed when filling in the questionnaire, then getting the decision of candidate status, then fulfilling these benchmarks or 7 steps in order to open negotiations, etc. So we will be ready to go with the speed. We will be ready for your merit-based approach. But for us, membership to the EU, that's one of the cornerstones of real victory. If we're having, for instance, this peace settlement and nothing is about the EU, that's not just at last in peace. You have to understand this. For us, it's the guarantee. And yes, answering your question, we are ready to speed up this discussion on establishing something very serious within the EU, military and defense component. Please, once again, think over this idea of my president. United Armed Forces of Europe. This is the only component this wonderful institution lacks now. A wonderful economic operation, people to people, free movement of people, goods and services, whatever. Here, I think this is the best institution world over. But what is lacking? And we can't afford ourselves not to have it in this period of time. And Ukraine is ready and will be, I'm sure, to be the leader here. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Zhovkva. It will be a geopolitical decision, but I always say that having Ukraine in the EU will be like winning the lottery, simply because Ukraine will bring so much, whether it's economic benefits, CFSP, agriculture, finally taste tomatoes and some other fruits that actually taste like real tomatoes, right?
True.
So it will be a total win-win. So I'd like to thank you very much for joining us. First and foremost for Ukraine, but for itself as well, because we're in this together. Huh? This is not a war just on Ukraine; it's on Europe, huh? And we need to stand together, act together, and do the right thing. And hopefully, we'll see the first stand of that tonight. Thank you so much, and Slava Ukraine.
Thank you.